And they've forgotten that. Dietrich Bonhoeffer once said, Christianity without discipleship is always Christianity without Christ. Lee Camp, in his book Mere Discipleship, said Jesus of Nazareth always comes asking disciples to follow Him. Not merely accept Him, not merely believe in Him, not merely worship Him, but to follow Him. One either follows Christ or one does not. And that's where we are. Are we disciples? Are we growing in our faith? Are we walking with Christ and seeking to reach out to other people? That's the task God has given and Christ has given to His church. We either follow Christ in those areas or we don't. And our need for today is what we call great disciples. That means folks who are fully committed. And I feel like I'm preaching to the choir, and often I'm preaching to the choir. Because most of you folks are involved. You've been involved with Impact for at least 9 years, 8 years. This is our 5th Impact that we've done in this county, and many of you have volunteered and been involved with it. And so you are committed to following Christ and helping create other disciples, taking various responsibilities and jobs. And it's been wonderful. So it's kind of like, well, I'm telling you this, we need to be disciples that you already are. Or we can be greater disciples. In fact, we can be God's greatest disciples, not to lord over other people. We don't take what we know in Christ and look at somebody and say, well, you don't know what I know. I'm lording it over. Jesus says that's not what discipleship is all about. It's a discipleship of serving, of getting down on your face and hands and serving somebody else and exalting them, not yourself. Listen to what Jesus said about being a great disciple and various things. I won't quote the verses, but listen to what it says. Whosoever will come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. He said, whoever of you does not forsake all that he has cannot be my disciple. He said, whoever desires to become great among you, let him be your servant. And whoever desires to be first among you, let him be your slave. In other words, you want to be great, a great disciple, you get down and humble yourself. You become a servant slave. He said, whoever exalts himself will be humbled. And he who humbles himself will be exalted. Jesus said, if anyone desires to be first, he shall be last of all and servant of all. If we want to be great in God's eyes, we need to be lowest in man's eyes. You see, when we hear what Jesus says about discipleship and making a disciple and creating a disciple and pouring our life into someone else, it is absolutely contrary. It's 180-degree opposite of where the world is going, and the world tells us. The world is power hungry. You see it in politics. You see it on Facebook. You see it on Twitter. You see it on any social media. The message from all those areas is be somebody great. Even the cultural changes we see going on around us, LGBT and all these things going on, the message is you be something. You be somebody. You be something great. Stand up for yourself. Don't let people push you around. Don't let people walk all over you. Step out and be aggressive. Jesus says, no, you be a humble servant. Now read with me if you would. We're in Matthew chapter 18, beginning with verse 1. We don't have time to read all the verses, but I just want to read a few of them today. Matthew chapter 18. If you don't have a Bible with you, if you're visiting with it, there should be one next to the hymnal there. You can follow along with us. In Matthew 18, verse 1. At the same time, came the disciples unto Jesus, saying, who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven? And Jesus called a little child unto him, and set him in the midst of them, and said, verily I say unto you, except ye be converted and become as little children, ye shall not enter into the kingdom of heaven. Whosoever therefore shall humble himself as this little child, the same is greatest in the kingdom of heaven. And whoso shall receive one such little child in my name receiveth me. But whoso shall offend one of these little ones, which believe in me, it were better for him that a millstone were hanged about his neck, that he were drowned in the depth of the sea. Woe unto the world because of the offenses, for it must needs be that offenses come, but woe to that man by whom the offenses come. Wherefore if thy hand or foot offend thee, cut them off, and cast them from thee. It is better for thee to enter the life halt or maimed, rather than having 2 hands or 2 feet to be cast into everlasting fire. Skip down now to verse 10. Take heed that ye despise not one of these little ones. For I say unto you, that in heaven their angels do always behold the face of my Father, which is in heaven. We're going to stop right there. May the Lord add his blessing to the reading of His word. We're going to talk to a few more verses as well, but you get the idea here. What Jesus is saying about a disciple and what a disciple is. He describes the making of a great disciple. Because they ask the question here, obviously. 3 different calls upon God's followers. In a follower's life, if you're following Christ, there are 3 calls upon you to be a disciple of Jesus Christ. First is the call of conversion, verses 1 through 5. You say, well, I'm already converted. Well, that's good. That's important, to be born again. Notice the question here comes from the disciples in verse 1. Who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven? The disciples themselves, why would they ask such a question? They were asking for themselves. They weren't asking on behalf of anyone else. These fellows have been following Jesus around the dusty roads of Galilee for 3 years now. They're asking for themselves, who's going to be greatest? They want to know. Probably wondering, where do we stand in this group we're with? We've been with you all this time, and we want to know, where do we stand? Which one of us is the greatest? Probably pointing and thinking of themselves, who is the greatest in the heavens, in the kingdom of heaven. And obviously, they've been noticing Peter over these years. Peter was very prominent. He was always a spokesman for the group. And then notice the last couple of chapters, in chapter 16, he was the one that said, thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God. Jesus said, that's a great statement. You know who I am. The world doesn't know me, but you do. Peter goes on to say, well, nobody's going to hurt you, Jesus. I'm going to stand up for you, and I'll be right there with you. And every time, Peter was the prominent one in the last 2 chapters. In fact, at the very end of the last chapter, that someone asked Jesus, what about paying the taxes? He turned to Peter and said, Peter, go cast a hook into the water and pull out a fish. And in that fish you'll find a coin. Give that coin as our taxes to pay for it. And that's not the last we'll hear of Peter in the last chapter. He just suddenly disappears. And I have a feeling the ones who are asking this question, Peter was not present. He was out on the lake, the Sea of Galilee, on a fishing boat, trying to catch that fish. And now they come and say, well, since he's not there, tell us who is the greatest. And maybe they expected Peter was going to be named as the greatest. Maybe they thought, well, you people have you'll be here and here and here, hopefully. They just want to know. By the way, we think it's the case in verse 1. It says, at the same time. Literally, that word is at that same hour that Peter went off his fish. At that same hour, these events happened. Let us know where we stand. By the way, this is not a new desire of these disciples. They've always wondered where we were in this framework. The mother of James and John in chapter 20 of Matthew comes to Jesus and says, I want a high position. My sons, James and John, you have them sitting on either side of you in your kingdom. Now, when the other disciples heard that, they were indignant. Why? Because they wanted that position. They don't want to get mom to help these boys out. They want the positions themselves. Even when Jesus was in his final week of life, the Passion Week we call it, when he's facing the cross, the last week before he goes to that cross, in the upper room, these fellows are gathered around in Luke 22. It says, now there was also a dispute among them as to which of them should be considered the greatest. They were passionate. They had a pride problem. They wanted the position. They had thought of things in the earthly value system. Well, if he's got something, I want it. I want to be over you. And that idea of who is the greatest, they probably all thought about themselves. Which among us? But Jesus suddenly surprises them. He bypasses every one of them, including Peter, pulls a child, taking a child in his hand, and bringing that child before them. That child wasn't even part of the group. That child wasn't one of the disciples. We're adults. We are following you. We know what we're doing. That child's not a part of us, but yet he pulls this child sets him in the midst of them. Notice it says of them, the last phrase of verse 2. Put him in the middle of the disciples. So you could see firsthand what a great disciple of Allah, who's going to be greatest in the kingdom. He says, verily I say, except ye be converted and become like little children. Now, they're saying to themselves, we're already following Jesus. We don't need to be converted. We don't need to be born again. We've experienced this. We know all about that. That word converted is the word strepha. Passive subjunctive. The idea of turning around, inward turning. A change inwardly. It's the same term that Jesus used toward Peter. You remember when in the upper room, Jesus said to Simon, 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 Satan has desired to sift you like wheat. But I prayed for you, Peter. And when thou art converted, same word, strepha, strengthen thy brethren. Peter didn't need to get born again. He didn't need to be converted. It's a turning inward. He's saying that, Peter, when you have that inward turning of your mind, you turn back to me after you betray me in the days ahead. When that takes place, strengthen your brethren. When you turn back around. When you turn in repentance and return to Christ, to Him, that's what the turning is all about. The same here. He says, when you have been converted, when you have turned back to me, and then become as little children. Becoming as little children. Now, there are different terms for the word child in the New Testament and in the Bible. One of those terms is weos. It's a Greek word which means son. We speak of that person as, this is the son. You're usually speaking of an adult offspring, speaking of an heir. That's an heir, a son. Then there's teknon, which is a born one, literally. It means an offspring, say a child of Abraham. That's a child. Child, that could be an adult. But pagion is the word used here. It's a word which literally means child, but it means a young one. We say young'uns. That's exactly what it means. They're young, and the emphasis on the young, up to the ages 7 and 8. When you're talking about a pagion, you're talking about somebody who's very childlike before the age of 8. Entirely dependent on parents. And in the Jewish life, even that culture today and back in those days, there were stages of a child's maturity. Obviously, a toddler, a babe in arms had to be cared for by their parents, and they were dependent on those folks. And in fact, dependency lasted up to about age 8. They were in the home, they were dependent. At the age of 9 through the teenage years, that child is no longer dependent on the parents, but is a person who is working in the house, perhaps serving as helper. That child would run errands. The child has some freedom. That child perhaps was a shepherd of sheep, as David was. You remember David? He was a teenager. We know that because when he was shepherding those sheep, he was still in his home environment. Now, he ran an errand. He took the food, the supplies to his brothers who were out in the battlefield, because at age 19 and on, you become eligible to be a soldier or serving in the military. He wasn't that old, so he was probably in those teenage years, being a servant, being not dependent on his parents, but having that freedom to go. And those ages, those frameworks, were with the Jewish people all along. We read about that in 1 Samuel 17, how David did that. Well, a child, a pagion, was a child dependent upon parents in the home, still learning, still under the authority of the parents, and yet open to things. Because what is the little child like? What is a pagion like? We saw this in Vacation Bible School. We saw it here a while ago. We were seeing. Full of energy. They have a teachable spirit. There's a simplicity about them. The things aren't complicated for a child. They're full of faith, full of trust. You can see in the faces of these kids as they sang. They have many questions, by the way. In fact, those Sunday school teachers or VBS teachers, they had lots of questions to ask about things that many times we adults don't think about. And yet, as they're asking the questions, they're relying upon the answers of the parents, of the fathers. And that's what these folks need to be. The child is also happy, playful, naive to danger. They don't know anything about danger. That's why we have to warn them. Don't you step out in that road. Don't you cross that railroad track. There's danger. The child is naive about it. That child is active and alive, full of life. And that child, as I told these kids the other night when we had our evangelism session, you children want to know more about Jesus. Children just do. They're drawn to Jesus. We see it all the time. We see it in Scripture. They came to Jesus. When his disciples kind of turned them away and said, don't bother Jesus, he said, accept Jesus. You come to me. Children that way. They want to know more. And finally, they're humble. Look at verse 4. Whosoever therefore shall humble himself as this little child, this pagion, the same is greatest in the kingdom of heaven. Well, all these characteristics are characteristics of one who is a converted disciple. Changed mind, turned to Christ, becoming just like Jesus. And then in verse 5 it says, and whoso shall receive one such little child in my name, receiveth me. What's that mean? Is that some kind of proxy evangelism? You receive a child and you receive Jesus? Well, in a sense, it is, but it's not really. It's not proxy. It's not that you have a child come, but it's the fact a child's presence, the presence of fellow believers. You see, when Christians gather in a church like this, or anytime they come together, they cannot help but talk about the power of Jesus in their life and the joy of Jesus. If you've ever been around a group of Christians, and it wasn't until college that I really ran across a group of excited Christians that was at a conference. I've never seen Christians happy, excited about Jesus, singing joyfully to Him. I'd been involved in church all my life, and to me, Christians were just dead. They came to church, they sat down, went through the motions of church. They weren't excited. But when I saw Christians who were excited about Jesus, I want that. I want that Jesus. In fact, that's where Jesus is really shared, where there's excitement of Him. The world sees the difference between a group of folks who know Christ and are excited about Him and a group of folks who really don't know Jesus. They see the difference. And the amazing thing is, Christians, we see the world differently too. Because we're not sitting here saying it's all ours and we're holding on to it. We see the world as needy. Those folks who don't know Christ, they need Jesus. We want them to know Jesus. So conversion is really a turning of your mind to the fact that the world needs Christ. And whosoever received one such little one, the presence of Christ, to be passed on to somebody else. So we say the call of conversion, that's change of thinking. Secondly, it's a call to consecration, verses 6 through 9. That means separation from sin. It sounds pretty harsh here. Whoso shall offend one of these little ones, which believe in me, it were better for him that a millstone were hanged about his neck. To offend somebody, to keep somebody. What does that mean? Jesus turns from what we should be, childlike in our faith, to what we should not be. That is, turning people away from Christ. The contrast here obviously is in verse 6, the first word, but. Whoso shall offend. You want to bring these young ones to Christ. You want to be one who will lead others to Christ. Don't turn them away. Don't be a stumbling block. That word for offend there is literally stumbling block. Scandalon. We get our word scandal from this word. It's an offense, a stumbling block. We don't put a stumbling block in the presence of somebody else, in front of a fellow believer. We don't try to trip somebody up, a child that's around. You folks who have kids, your child's toddling around, and you don't mean to, but maybe your foot gets in the way, and they trip over your foot and they fall, and you want to help them. You just cause them to fall. It's an accident, obviously, but don't put a stumbling block. You wouldn't obviously on purpose put a stumbling block in front of your child. He says, don't do that. How do we put stumbling blocks in front of fellow believers? By sin. Look at verses 8 and 9. Wherefore, if thy hand or thy foot offend thee, cut it off, cast it from thee. Better to enter into life halt or maimed rather than having 2 hands, 2 feet. In verse 9, If thine eye offend thee, pluck it out. I mean, wow, this is harsh. It's serious business to play around with sin. You see, when you play around with sin as a believer, you're causing others and yourself to stumble before God. It's like cancer. You've had cancer perhaps in your life, or a family member's had cancer. What do? Do you sit back and laugh about it? No. You go to the quickest doctor you can and see about some surgery to remove it if possible. Well, sin is cancerous to the Christian's life. It destroys your life. It keeps you from Jesus. How many folks involved in sin today, involved in some sinful activity, want to be around Christians or want to be around Jesus, or even want to be around the Bible? They don't. It keeps you from Jesus. It keeps you from Him. And it also destroys others' lives because you keep them from Jesus as well. Your sin causes others to stumble. You see, it's so serious. Sin is so serious. We think about, well, it's just a little sin, did some wrong things, offended God, offended other people. No big deal. Just forget it, right? Sin is so serious that God had Jesus go to the cross to cover our sins. When you think about it. That's the awfulness of sin. It's horrible. It's nothing you laugh about. It's nothing that you say, oh, just flip it off, don't worry about it. Because Jesus took upon Him our jealousy. He took our lies. He took our hatred, our hurt feelings, our lust, our angry words, our thoughts, our blasphemy, our drugs, our alcoholism, our selfish pride. He took all of our sins, sins of all time, and took them there at the cross for us. And we, as a result, are set free. You've heard Charles Wesley's hymn we sing quite often. One of those verses says, long my imprisoned spirit lay, fast bound in sin and nature's night. Thine eye diffused a quickening ray. I woke, the dungeon filled with light. My chains fell off, my heart was free. I rose, went forth, and followed thee. Amazing love, how can it be that thou, my God, shouldst die for me? You see, we've all been cleansed. We think, well, it's just a little sin. No, it's something so horrible that Jesus had to die for us on the cross to forgive it. And when we're cleansed, we want to lead others to the same cleansing. We more than anything want to help others to see that same cleansing so they too can go to heaven and experience a life with Christ. So we got the call of conversion, call of consecration, but finally there's the call of compassion, verses 10 through 14. You see, this is the heart of Christ. Take heed that you despise not one of these little ones. For the Son of Man, verse 11, is come to seek and save that which was lost. How think ye, if a man have 100 sheep, and one of them go astray, doth he not leave the 99, and goeth unto the mountains, and seeketh that which is gone astray? The very heart of Jesus Christ is caring for those who have lost their way, that do not know the way, that ought to be ours as well. We see the love of the Father. We go after the one straying sheep. One sheep that's out there. God's concerned about it. Verse 13. If so be that he find it, verily I say unto you, he rejoiceth more than that sheep than 99 which need not, and went not astray. Even so it is not the will of your Father which is in heaven that one of these little ones should perish. Why do we get so excited when someone comes to Christ? When someone gets saved? Because they've been born into our family. They belong to Christ. They're going to heaven someday. They've received the same knowledge of Jesus we have. They're a brother or sister now in Christ. In fact, someone inserts verse 11. This probably wasn't in the original, but the Son of Man has come to seek and to save that which is lost. So don't ever forget. That's what Jesus is all about. And he came to rejoice over the lost sheep, the lost coin, the lost son. When things are lost, God rejoices and heaven rejoices when they are found. He rejoices and heaven rejoices when someone else is found. Why don't we? I hope you're not like some that say, oh no, somebody's come forward, somebody's trust in Christ today. It's going to make my lunch a little bit later. Unfortunately, there are Christians like that. We ought to get excited when somebody comes to Jesus. You say to yourself, well, this is interesting, but how can I restore that discipleship quality that Jesus spoke of? How can I get that back in my life? Of conversion, of consecration, of compassion. I want to regain that servant heart that every disciple must have. How do I do it? First of all, get free of sin. Confess it. Leave it at the cross and don't go back. Jesus or John said, if we confess our sins, He is faithful and just to forgive us of our sins and cleanse us from all unrighteousness. Confess it. Give it to Him. Even as a believer, those sins that have accumulated, don't let it stay with you. Secondly, admit your weaknesses. We have weaknesses. Admit it to God. Don't let them become a source of pride and say, well, I can't do that because of my weakness. Well, I'm weak here, so I just can't serve the Lord. It becomes defeatism. Don't let it conquer you. Bring it before the blood and say, Lord, here's my weakness. I put it in your lap, and Lord, you've got to change it if possible. Or work around it if you have to. Thirdly, examine your habit patterns. Routines that become stumbling blocks for other people. You say, well, it doesn't bother me. Well, it may not, but it may bother someone else. It may be something that as a believer, you're causing someone else to fully walk with Christ, to fully be that disciple that God wants. And then finally, make your mind up today, now. Don't say, I'm going to get this, I'll work that out later. We'll talk about that some other time. Some of you may wonder, why every Sunday do you have an invitation at the end of the service? Because there needs to be somebody that God is working in their life in such a way. They need to respond. They need to give their life to Christ. They need to become a church member. Something is going on, and we don't even know it. But the Spirit of God is working. In October of 1871, Dwight L. Moody was preaching in Chicago, the largest congregation he ever preached in. His message was on what shall we do with Jesus. He explained all during that message the need to make Jesus Savior and Lord. He fully explained to that congregation how that was important. At the end of the service, he said this, I wish you would take this text home with you tonight. And I want you to think more over it during the next week. And next Sunday, we'll get together, we'll talk more about the cross and decide what we're going to do with Jesus of Nazareth. At the end of the service, his music director, Ira Sankey, got up and began singing the closing hymn. He never finished that hymn. And the roar of fire engines in the streets outside as the great Chicago fire began raging. About 300 people were killed in that fire. Millions of dollars in property damage. That fire basically destroyed Chicago in 1871. Years later, Moody reflected back as he recounted the story with great regret for giving people a week to think about their salvation. Instead of making making their minds up right then. And Moody said, I never went back to doing that. I've never since went back to that approach. Moody always pressed the people to decide now, while there's still time, while the Spirit is still speaking in their heart. You see, no one knows what tomorrow brings, and no one knows when the Spirit of God will work in your life like He's working now. Will you do what God wants you to do now? Do it right away. Commit yourself to Him. Tell Him you want to be that great disciple, not just a nominal disciple. You want to be the great disciple who humbles him or herself before His throne. He says, Lord, use me. Heavenly Father, we thank you for reminding us of Jesus' words of our need to commit ourselves to you. To not just follow, not just believe, not just worship, as important as all these things are, but to fully be a disciple, a committed one who gives him or herself to you. And say, Lord, make me that disciple. That when the world looks at us, they say, what strange people. They love each other. They have a love and a joy in their heart that I don't have. And Lord, as they see us, they're not seeing us, but they're really seeing Jesus. who has worked in us in such a way that He's changed us. But Lord, perhaps right now, there's some folks who are saying, well, I don't want to put this off. I'll postpone this. But your Spirit's saying, no, make it now. Make that commitment. You would bring about a church home. God's speaking about this place. And God, this is the place. But wherever He's leading, make that commitment. Make it a full commitment. And say, it's all in your hands. Maybe it's about trusting in Christ. Following Him as a new believer in Him. What a wonderful thing. What a joy. We'll simply say, Lord, we're waiting on you to work. And when you do, Lord, we will be so excited. Because you've changed a heart. You've brought a lost one to yourself. Help us, Lord, to make that which will be pleasing unto you. And we thank you. We thank you for what you're going to do in our lives this coming week as we prepare, as we look forward to the great outpouring for those young people next week. That you do some powerful things with us as well. We thank you for this in Jesus' name. Amen. Our invitation hymn is number 305. I've decided to follow Jesus. As you turn your hymnals to 305, let it be your prayer as you sing the words, Lord, I've decided I will follow Jesus. I'm going to get my full and complete commitment. And I want to follow Jesus. I will follow Him. And I want to invite you to come. I'll meet you in front if you need to talk to me and make your decision. I'll be glad to. If you just need to come and kneel by this altar and say, Lord, I want to fully surrender. You do that and talk to Him. And you talk to Him, that's who you talk to. As we sing in 305. Let's stand together.